Hello everybody, my name is Bill. This is SixRounds Studio. Today we're back up at the video set. What I want to do is do a complete reveal of the restoration on this 1905 Ithaca. And I want to kind of recap what we did, talk about the process, talk about how we got from the very beginning to today, to this video where we're presenting the shotgun as completed. Now, as of this coming April, this gun will have been in my shop for 2 years. Yeah, 2 years, that's a long time. And I want to talk about that here. When I took the gun in, it was actually in queue. I had several projects ahead that I needed to get done. But it doesn't mean that before I started to work on it that I wasn't actually already doing something with the shotgun. I was doing research, a lot of research, hours going through books, going through internet sites, trying to understand both the history of Ithaca and this particular shotgun. I'm going to tell you, I said this in a previous video, there's not a lot of information out there about Ithaca, the Ithaca Gun Company. There's one book that I found. It was terribly expensive, and I wasn't going to buy that book just to get through this shotgun restoration. We needed to do a lot of research. Needed to find out, is there any information on how this gun operates, how it functions, anything about how it was manufactured. It was tough to find anything on that. So even though the gun's been here for darn near 2 years, it was work that was being done nearly constantly on it from the day that I got it in. Now, sad note, one of the members of the family that hired me to do this restoration, unfortunately, before I was done, he did pass away. So I feel a deep sadness for the family, but they will get it back. It will honor the great-grandfather who originally bought this thing back in the early 1900s. When I started the restoration and started filming it, my initial plan was only to collect these videos, collect these images, collect the work over the entire time or span of time that it took me to do the restoration, and then make a one restoration video at the very end. But as I got to doing this, I realized that there was so much misinformation on what it takes to do a restoration. We all watch these TV shows where they'll restore a car in a half an hour or 2 episodes, and I knew this was fake. I knew it wasn't real, and it always bothered me because I've been in restorations most of my life, and it always bothered me that these shows would show these miraculous transformations in a half an hour or an hour. So ultimately my decision was to actually video the entire restoration sequence. In fact, even looking at how do you think your way through each of these problems? And on this shotgun, folks, there was a lot of thinking. There was a lot of things wrong with this that I needed to go after. And I wanted to make sure I showed that to my audience. I know that I've had some comments that I've dragged this thing on, but the reality is that's what a restoration is. So all of you who have been a member of this channel, who have stayed through the entire process, I know who you are. You comment on a regular basis, and I want to thank you for sticking it out and staying with me through this project. So what I want to do in this video is recap the process and talk about each of those sequences that I went through, and during that show you some before and after shots or videos of where it started and how it ended up. And then at the very end of this video, if you stick around, I'll do a complete pan through the entire gun, and you can see it as done before I give this thing back to its owner, which I'm hoping to do in the next week or two. All right, so let's get started on that. So I've already mentioned that I had to do a lot of research, and again, there wasn't a lot of information out there available, so it took a little bit to get as much as I could. Some of the things I was curious about was, how did they color case? Were they all color cased? How did they color the barrels? How were the stocks manufactured? What did the stock look like? And because of that, I ended up purchasing or getting in several Ithaca shotguns. And I talked to a guy who collects old Ithacas, so I got some pretty valuable information during that initial research phase. Matter of fact, I even had to ask some questions as I was going through the process. One of the first things that I did, and it was one of the earliest videos that I did, was I needed to survey the gun. Whenever you do a restoration, that survey is critical, because that's when you discover all of the things that might be wrong, that you might have to face in the restoration, some of those repairs that will really make themselves obvious to you. So during that survey, I also did a lot of photographs, and those photographs were records of where the gun started. In some facts, those photographs and those videos were, well, this is how this gun was, this is how this gun came apart. Well, this is how it goes back together. For instance, one of the comments that I got was, well, why don't you just go find a schematic? Why don't you just go find a video on YouTube that shows you how to take it apart? That didn't exist. None of that information. I could not find a schematic. I could not find a video on this particular double hammer gun. It doesn't exist. It's not out there. I had to discover all of this as I was working through the restoration. So that survey was critical. It was really important that not only did I take those photographs before I started the dismantle, but I continued to take photographs and videos as I dismantled. Again, it is the record of work that was done on this shotgun as we progressed through that restoration. So as I got it apart, I needed to break it down into components. So you've heard the old story, lock, stock, and barrel. So I mean, that is always sort of traditionally the major components. So one of the first things I had to do is I had to look at the gun stocks. I mean, the gun stock is both the butt and the forearm. And if you were following the restoration from the beginning, one of the most obvious problems was the amount of finish that was on these gun stocks, or especially this butt stock. The owner had somewhere along the line had to do a repair, and after doing the repair had put coats and coats and layers of shellac on the gun stock. Now I had to get all that off. Now that was fun. I mean, I'm in rubber gloves and stripper, and we're trying to get all of that off. But while we're doing it, we're trying not to get down into the lower layers of the stock, because I needed to see what that looked like. So the first thing was stripping down that butt stock and getting all that finish off. Once we got the finish off, it had become obvious that there was a lot of damage, a lot of splits, a lot of breaks, a lot of cracks, all had to be repaired. So we did all those. I had a friend of mine, Mark Adams, come in. We sort of talked about how is the best way to get the oils out of those cracks. Then I had to rebuild those side panels. Those side panels didn't exist. During those early repairs, those side panels had been pulled off. They'd been sanded off. And I needed to replicate, replace those. Fortunately, I had those other Ithaca shotguns that I brought in. I could get a good sense of what those original side panels needed to look like. As well, there was some remnants of those side panels left on this shotgun. So between the shotguns where the gun stocks were in good shape and using those remnants of shape that were on this shotgun, I was able to replicate what I believe is a fairly honest copy of what might have been there in that original shotgun. Also, when we got that stock completed and I was getting ready to do the refinish, I had to replicate or repoint and replicate the checkering. The checkering was all messed up. So I had to redo the checkering. I had to trying the best I can to trace over those original lines in the checkering, but I had to recreate some of that checkering where it was completely gone and missing. I am not a particularly great checkerer, but I did the best I could, going as slow as I could to replicate this checkering as best as I could. And I'm actually going to tell you I'm pretty proud of myself, because not doing this a lot, to get this checkering look as fine as it does. I'm really pleased and proud of that. Well, the next thing we needed to do is we needed to work on that receiver, and we had to get it apart. That was where I got some of my most negative comments, taking that receiver apart. I never had one apart. There was no information. Everything had to come apart slowly and carefully, and I had to learn what those parts were and how they function and how they interacted or how they interrelated to all the other parts in the gun. That took time. It took patience. It took a calm hand. It took a calm mind, because I have no idea what was going to happen as I was dismantling that receiver. There were a lot of leaf springs in this thing, which is sort of unusual, because a lot of these guns they do have leaf springs, but they also have a lot of coil springs. And this thing had more leaf springs than it had coil springs, so that was something I had to work through. So we did get the gun apart. We did get those parts stored away until we were ready to repair or restore those parts and get them back in the gun. Now, I have to say this, I only had to replace one part. One of the little coil springs got damaged when I was dismantling it, so I did have to replace that one coil spring. Unfortunately, I had enough coil spring supply that I could find the right size and then replicate it, and that was sort of the return spring on the lever. Once I got that all done, we needed to polish up that receiver. Polishing that receiver, again, when I started this, when I started the videos, what I explained to you guys is that I wanted this not to look like a brand new gun. I wanted this to look like a gun that was well maintained, well stored over the years. I didn't go about trying to pull every scratch, every ding, every minor flaw that was the story and was the history of this shotgun as it traveled through time with its owner. So there are dings that I left, there are stains that I left, there are small scratches that I didn't try to sand out, or I didn't try to file out. I tried to leave some of that story on the gun, because when you do a restoration, you want to remember always, it's only original once. And even though this gun was in such poor shape, and I did have to do major work on bringing it back, where I could, I wanted to leave as much of that original story in the gun. So there are a few dings, there are a few scratches, there are a few dents that I didn't work particularly hard to pull out, because I wanted to make sure that at least some of that story remained, so that that gun looked like an old but well-maintained firearm through time and into the future. So on that receiver, when I polished it, again, there were some scratches, there was some rust pitting that I needed to pull out as much of it as was reasonable without changing the original shape and dynamics of that receiver. So there were some of that. But clearly, while you're doing that, you want to maintain all the shadow lines, all the light lines, and not sort of round those over and make them look flawed when the gun goes back together. So my goal is always that if somebody were to look at that gun, and unless they knew, they would not realize that that gun had been restored. That's always my goal, to make it look like it did when it came out of the factory, the best that I can. So I never want to roll over edges. That all said, when I did the polishing, I tried not to be really aggressive with it. I tried to just sort of use finer grits of paper and not get down into the roll marking or the scroll work. I wanted all that scroll work, all that lettering to look as fresh as it was the day it came out of the factory. And I think I accomplished that. Color case, all right. So I said early on that I talked to one of my contacts in the industry, and one of the collectors of these Ithacas. And the answer was, every Ithaca that came out of the factory during that period of time, during the late 1800s into the early or mid 1900s, they were all color cased. All right, so that was the answer to that. And in fact, every example that I brought in to examine, they were all color cased. All right, in various they were various condition, various quality, but they were all color cased. I did not want to spend the client's money sending this out to somebody who did true color case. I was also concerned about the age of the receiver, knowing that this gun probably wasn't going to be fired, that I didn't want to risk damaging that receiver and having or creating even more work for me and more expense for the clients. So we talked earlier about this chemical color case process that I discovered. A lot of you were already aware of that. So I did some testing, I did some experimenting, did some artwork trying to understand what was the best way to use that chemical. And I'm going to tell you frankly, folks, that color case finish, that chemical gel finish, it's amazing. I'm so pleased with it that I'm gonna use it more. I'm going to use it as a colored finish in lieu of using bluing in some instances. It's just stunning and it's beautiful. So we color cased the receiver, we color cased the hammer, we color cased the lever, we color cased the triggers. And when I looked at all the other shotguns from the period, that was sort of typical. I actually looked at some photos in some auction catalogs that I had, and typically those were the things that were color cased. And I could also see evidence of that color casing in the parts themselves. So we did that. I then had to polish and blue those parts that were traditionally polished and blued. So we had to do this. Trigger guard was polished and blued. The banding on the forearm was polished and blued. So we got that done. A lot of the screws, all the screws were polished and blued. So we did that as well. That left, okay, lock, stock, and barrel. That left the barrel. So we needed to get that barrel polished, cleaned up, and then blued. But the concern was that we wanted to be able to see that pattern, that Damascus pattern. And typically these are a silver gray color. They're not a bright blue like a modern firearm is. So we needed to find a method or use a method to color the Damascus barrel or to blue those, so that again at the end you got sort of that traditional color without hiding that Damascus pattern. So we used Mark Lee's slow rust blue in a humidity chamber. It worked phenomenal. The results is phenomenal. It's just a beautiful, beautiful patina. And that patina looks like it might have looked if this gun had survived in its original condition for 75 or 100 years, 115 years. So that is stunning. That is just beautiful. The last thing I needed to do was restore that forearm. The forearm restoration was just a smaller version of restoring the finish on the buttstock. There was no damage on that forearm. Just a matter of getting the old finish pulled off, so that I could, again, I needed to copy the coloring of the buttstock and match that on that forearm. So we did that as well. I had to repoint the checkering. There were a few parts of that checkering that were missing, so I had to go in and replicate that a little bit. But that forearm was a relatively easy part to restore and to refinish. That's it. We put the gun back together, and it's stunning. It's beautiful. I'm proud as hell, because I mentioned in a short video that I did the amount of things that I had to experience and learn, things that I'd never done before, and it's just amazing. It's amazing that as I was learning these things, I was able to produce a restoration that is as beautiful as this shotgun is. All right, guys, so stay around for the full reveal. In the next video, I want to talk a little bit about the future of the channel. I want to talk about some of the changes that I'm wanting to make, some of the old content that I want to reintroduce that I really enjoyed making. So I want to thank all of you guys for sticking around, for being a part of this channel. I especially want to thank all you guys that joined me over on the Patreon channel. I really do appreciate those contributions that you've made. Between Patreon and a small amount of money that I get from AdSense on YouTube, it helps support the channel, helps pay for all the services that I have to buy in order to produce the best videos for you guys that I can. So again, both you as viewers, and all of you guys from Patreon, you guys are special. I really thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It tells YouTube that this is a good channel, something worth watching. So they'll share it with more people, because those algorithms, they're a tough nut to crack, I'm telling you guys. Channel's growing nicely. Love to see it grow a little bit faster. Love to get this content out to more people so that the world understands that the firearms industry is this. It's about history. It's about tradition. It's about families. I'd like to get that out to more and more people. Guys, thank you. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next video.